Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
All of our guests today, including Farhan, standing by at Rogers Arena, brought to you by Able Auctions, ableauctions.ca. Delaney's OK Tire and Langley inbox. We attacked you in the last segment. So Gurinder from Surrey. Yep. Rick is right. It's a bad look. A player and an agent negotiate a contract with a certain team to play for that certain team. Trading the player in the first year of the contract is not a good look.
Thank you.
And then Gurinder goes on to say, regardless, let's do JT next. Thank you.
Hey, you sign a 3-year deal? You don't expect to be moved in the first freaking year, Donnie.
Come on.
Give your head a shake if you think that's the case.
As if this is the first time that's happened. Joining us now from TSN on this trade deadline day. He's busy, but he's made time for us. Farhan Lalji. How are you, sir?
I'm good, and we got Patrick Johnson warming up in the bullpen. So TSN lighting, has your show ever looked so good?
No, trust me, it hasn't. Even with Rick and I on the set, that's very impressive. That? TSN pulls it all.
You got a lot of makeup on, pal.
I changed out of my funny Hawaiian Dolly Wallian shirt. No. Put on a suit just for you guys.
Oh my God,
looking good. That suit is equal to our entire budget for the whole year at Donnie and Dolly. Okay, your reaction to what we learned today. Curtis Lazar, Farhan, moving on to the Jersey Devils for a 4th-round draft pick.
Well, I learned that if you're a good guy, you don't last in Vancouver. So we saw Bruce Boudreau get moved. We saw Bo Horvat get moved. Luke Shen got moved. Now Curtis Lazar's got moved. I'm here, That's so I'm not sure what that says about the good guy factor. But, it didn't necessarily work out for Curtis, unfortunately. And not that anyone had big expectations. $1 million contract. He was supposed to be a 4th-line center. Never really got a lot of time at center. Spent most of his time on the wing. Didn't really turn into the effective penalty killer they were hoping for in the right shot center option in key situations. He's had better success on better teams, and I think he's going to do that in New Jersey. So, Rick, you're right. It's not necessarily a good look when you move somebody in the first year of a contract or before their contract even kicks in the case of JT Miller. But look, I don't think Curtis Lazar is all that upset about it, right? We talked to him earlier today, and he's pretty excited. He's going to get into the playoffs, maybe go on a bit of a run here. I mean, I don't know that anyone's getting past Boston in the East, but could be a big Rangers-Devils first-round playoff series, and he could potentially be a part of that. So for him, it's been a difficult season, and, he's been to other stops. This is his 3rd time being moved during trade deadline week. So I don't think he's too upset about this right now.
Farhan, the Canucks reportedly turning down an offer of several draft picks from Pittsburgh in order to get JT Miller to move back home, to the Penguins, not back to the Penguins, but to the Penguins. What do you believe when it comes to JT Miller, who played last night?
Well, there was some conversation, right? I mean, there was clearly conversation, and it sounds like it was the Canucks as interested as Pittsburgh. We heard so much when Demko's name was in trade talks that it was people calling Vancouver and kicking tires, whereas here it's pretty clear this was a mutual conversation. And I want to know what exactly happened, whether in fact they did turn down draft picks, because it just doesn't make sense, right? Because they acquire a draft pick, a 1st-round draft pick in the Bo Horvat deal, and they were able to flip that for somebody they wanted. You'd have to believe that they would have been able to do that here if the picks were high enough, right? And certainly they didn't want to just clear the salary, because I think that's an admission of failure. I think they wanted to get some legitimate pieces back, but draft picks are capital. There's opportunity cost and benefit associated with moving on from a heavy salary. You can spend that on a really good player, even if it's not this year. You can flip draft picks for good players if they're high enough draft picks. So I would hope that wasn't the only reason that deal didn't get moved. I think that would have been short-sighted if they happen to have 2 high draft picks available to them. And again, I don't know that to be the case for sure. But if that happened and they turned it down, it's not consistent with what they've done in other moves here.
One thing about Miller, we're all talking about the trade. What's the word down there at Rogers Arena about the Canucks announcing he's out week to week on Monday, and then he plays last night? Like, what is going on there?
There you go.
Well, look, I think there was some level of injury, right? And when that injury took place, we'll see. Was it serious enough to keep him out of a game? Probably not, right? I think we all kind of are looking at this with a bit of a jaundiced eye. I mean, even Curtis Lazar last night got taken off IR. He said earlier today that he was expecting to play tonight or play last night, and then all of a sudden this was a possibility, so they held him out. And I have to believe that these conversations had something to do with the decision to keep him out on Monday. I'm not saying there was no injury. But I don't know that there was something significant enough. I mean, they were calling it week to week, even though I believe his agent just said it could be a week or a couple of games or whatever it was. Certainly didn't sound like week to week. So, yeah, you've got to look at what happened on Monday completely cynically. That's fair.
Brock Besser played last night, which tells me that, if they were close with someone, Farhan, they wouldn't have played him last night. Same as Miller and same as all these guys. They iced their complete lineup. Tells me there's no major changes coming today. But Brock Besser, that one's got to be tough. You know what, Farhan? I think a lot of people feel this kid needs a fresh start somewhere, but it looks like it's going to be a summer move.
Yeah, it sounds that way. And, you talk about a guy in his first year on a deal, right? And this is a guy that wanted to get moved, right? For the last 2 months, his agent has had the ability to negotiate with other teams. And, they made a mistake, right? And, that was a leap of faith this organization took. You can't blame Jim Benning, and it didn't work out for them. I get why they did it, because they wanted to protect the asset, but protecting that asset cost them $6.7 million this season, right? And potentially down the road, if they can't move him, it's preventing them from moving this asset and recouping something back. So, and I'm sure that Besser is a little bit conflicted as well, because this is a stressful time for everybody. And on top of that, while he would want a change of scenery, I think he just does like his teammates, right? I mean, he is close with Pettersson and many of these other guys. So it's not like he's a guy in the room that can't wait to get out of the room. It's just a guy that thinks that maybe I'll get a little more success with a fresh start. And I think that's fair, And I talked to Billy Guerin about it last night, the Wild GM, and he said, look, I love the player. I still think he can score, but we're not going to add that salary. And I'm sure that's a similar conversation that they're having with teams around the league. So tough for Brock. He's, as I talk about the good guy factor in this room, he's one of them. Yeah. And, too bad that he's going through this, because he's been through a lot the last couple of years, and hopefully he gets the fresh start that he's looking for.
Man, things move so fast, Farhan. The Lazar trade, Miller talk, Besser talk, Rick embarrassing himself with his support of his agent buddies, all of that. We forget that if 48 hours ago, the Canucks made a rather significant trade. I'll ask for your reaction to this trade as well. Philip Hronek coming over from Detroit.
Yeah. I was surprised, and I guess I shouldn't have been, because ultimately this is the type of move this organization professes that it's going to do, and I still think the return was high, right? A first and a second round pick for a guy that's a top four defenseman, and they need help on the right side. But this is what happens when you don't develop, right? And it's not this group that should be blamed for the lack of development, because they are here a year, but we've seen a lack of development for quite some time here. When you don't develop, it costs you to chase, and it's tough. So. When we saw the Bo Horvat move, and it included a first-round pick, even though Beauvillier was a part of it, but there was also a young prospect. At that point, you thought, okay, maybe they're taking a longer view than what they've advertised. And then the smaller moves they've made so far this week, getting Kravtsov here, low-cost bet. You move $1.35 million in Stillman's deal for a prospect. Then you get a couple of mid-round picks, and you think, okay, maybe they're kind of headed with a bit more of a long-term view in mind. And then that deal happens, and you think, nope, it's pretty short-term again. But ultimately, we shouldn't be surprised, because this is what this management team has said. And, I get into arguments with Drancer and Harm on our show about this all the time, because they want to continuously pound on rebuild. And I know that the fan base feels the same way, and I don't disagree with that. But for me, going forward, I think you've got to grade them on what their professed goals are. And their professed goals are a short-term retool, regardless of whether that's coming down from ownership, whether it's right, whether it's wrong. That's what this management team has said they're going to do. So you got to judge them based on that and the moves they make within that context. And Hronek fits that. On other levels, it doesn't make sense, but it's consistent with what they've said they want to do.
Farhan, one more question. It sounds like you were at the game last night, and I think for a lot of people, the takeaway would be, from a Canuck point of view, they lost, which people are okay with. They've accepted things or results like that these days. But Demko looked strong, and I thought Kravtsov did as well. What did you think?
Yeah, I thought Kravtsov showed some confidence, and there were some pretty noticeable plays for him. I was happy to see that, and for him, it's going to be whether or not he can play at both ends of the ice if you want to get any kind of success and respect from Rick Tocchet. But again, some encouraging signs. And Demko, I don't know how you can't be encouraged. And it's funny, after the game, I asked him, I said, can you compare how you're feeling about your game now, where you stacked these two performances back to back, with how you felt before the injury? And he kind of smiled and said, I don't want to talk about that. And then later he was asked about it, or he wasn't asked about that. He was just asked about the work he's put into his game, and he circled back to what he didn't want to talk about, which was my play wasn't good enough before I got hurt. So when I was out for all those games, I took time to not just recover from the injury, but to also work on my game. He knew. And what we're seeing in these last 2 games may not be like first half of last season, Demko, but certainly, a good performance by the goaltender. And I've said before, he is the best contract this team has. It's their most efficient deal. And he's the single biggest guy that separates the rebuild from the retool. When you've got goaltending that good, you can't fully rebuild because you're going to win your share of games.
So the next hit you have from one of the hallways in your house or a powder room, maybe?
It could happen. Maybe I'll do it outside in the woods. I've got a green belt in the back, and we'll show that.
Very, very BC. Looking good, Farhan. You made time for us today, and we really appreciate it. Thanks so much, Farhan. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.